Hi there, my name's Eli, and this is a quick lesson in elasticity for your microeconomics adventure. Once we're done here, you should be able to grasp the fundamental idea behind elasticity and how it applies to economics. So we have to ask, what is elasticity before we get going? Well, elasticity is the measure of change in the quantity of goods or services relative to the measure of change in the price, income, or supply of those goods or services.
Now for this video, when we discuss elasticity and inelasticity, we're going to be basing it on what is called elasticity of demand. And the reason why I'm choosing to do that is because it's important at the end of the day to understand everything on a fundamental level. And elasticity of demand is a good way to start because it's very simple to look at, it's very applicable, and it's very intuitive after it's practiced a couple of times. So the formulas that you're going to see apply to elasticity of demand, and the descriptors that follow do as well. And of course, as you advance through your microeconomics class or whatever economics class you may be in, you'll further understand the further applications that go into it. One of the best ways to remember something is to use a physical example, and luckily, if your mind is telling you that elasticity, that sounds elastic, and what a rubber band, yes, you're right, and you're thinking in the right way. So, as a physical example, keep that in mind. If something is elastic, like this bungee cord, then it's got some play. You can wrap it around stuff, tie stuff down. It's not going to break, and you're the force that's acting on it. And when force is applied, it's elastic. But if something is inelastic, then it's a lot like this chain. It's very rigid. It doesn't really stretch much at all. But keep in mind that that doesn't mean that inelastic is a bad thing or a good thing, or that elastic is a bad thing or a good thing. There's a lot that goes into it.
So, it would sound like there would be some crazy mathematical formula behind it, but really, it's not that bad at all. Keep in mind that the triangle is delta, and delta means change. So, what you're looking at is the percent change in the quantity of demand over the percent change in the price. And what will happen when you do this math is you're going to come up with a number. And that number is going to either be more than 1 on 1 or, of course, less than 1.
Okay, so I told you to do some math, and on one side of the one it's less, and on the other side it's more. But does that really tell you much of anything? Well, it will down the road. It's important that you know how to do that problem. But to explain it a little better, if you're above one, then you are more elastic. And this is quite indicative of price taker markets. And the reason being is because in an elastic market, there's a whole bunch of substitutes. There's not a lot of volatility. People can come in and go as they please. There's not a huge amount of loss, and there's really not a lot of consequence. So, say a firm raises its price on a product just super sky high, thinking it could get away with it. It's not going to get away with it in an elastic market because there are so many other choices that can be had. Now, the exact opposite applies to an inelastic market, one that is less than one. And that is that an inelastic market doesn't move much. There's not a lot of change in price, and there's not a lot of change in output. And as far as demand goes, it's normally a market where people need it. So, as far as supply demanded, not a problem.
A couple of examples of elastic markets and products or things that we honestly just interact with every day, like your cars, your cell phones, the food that you buy at the store, all of those things have substitutes. You don't have to buy a Camry. You don't have to buy a Samsung. You don't have to buy instant mashed potatoes. There's other options. Those are very elastic markets, they're elastic products, and no one's really bound to them. A good example of inelasticity that we're all familiar with would be gasoline. And the reason why that's such a good example is because there's very few suppliers of gasoline. And if we need it, we're going to pay for it. It doesn't matter if it's $5 a gallon. If you have a family to drive around, you're going to pay $5 a gallon. And there's no real substitutes other than electric, hydrogen, whatever we have nowadays that just isn't feasible to jump to save that small amount of money.
And as I said earlier, this whole thing is based on the elasticity of demand, and that does not cover how elasticity and inelasticity affects firms and markets in different views. But what this does do is it gives you a good idea of what elasticity means, the concept behind it. And as long as you get the idea that if it's more than one, it is more elastic. It is less than one. It is less elastic. And where price takers and price searchers fall in those, then you'll have a good foot ahead of you going forward into the deeper stuff. I hope this was helpful. If not, leave me a comment and I would be happy to answer any more questions. And thank you for watching.